Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, and I just want to give a special thank you to all of you who have reached out to me since my mother passed last week. I really appreciate the support. Our show today is the Books, Blogs, and Poetry Show, and we have a very special and talented guest who's going to be joining us. Before we bring him out, we're going to bring out the star of our show. It's DIANN FLOYD BOEHM. Welcome to the show.
Good morning, Dr. Jacalyn. I'm excited about the show. What a guest we have today.
I know, another fabulous guest sent from Mickey Mickelson. Thank you, Mickey. We really do appreciate you and honor you. So, DIANN, you are also a client of Mickey's, so kudos to you. I know he helps support your work in many ways as well.
Yeah, he's pretty amazing. One of the smartest moves I've made since I've been getting my books out there in the world.
Well, DIANN, I'd love to spotlight you for a couple of minutes for you to share the work that you're doing, because since I've met you, and I don't even know if it's 3 years now or 2 years now, but you're constantly putting out content. You are an international award-winning author. You are a former educator. You're a keynote speaker. You're someone who loves children, is all about family. Tell us a little bit more about your work.
Oh, you're so kind, Dr. Jacalyn. So my latest work that I'm excited about is Boomer the Curious Bunny. And obviously by the title, you can tell it's for young children. But I mean, that's the main focus. But all my books, I like to think, are for everyone, because I want them to remember what it's like to be a kid and to be curious. So even as an adult, be curious about how the world is changing and all the exciting things around us. So Boomer is all about discovering what is beyond his little home area. And he goes and has quite an adventure. And then I have a book coming out, Dr. Jacalyn, in November 15th, actually. And it's a young adult historical fiction. It's a sequel to Rise, A Girl's Struggle for More. And this continues on with Ruby's journey to be what she's meant to be. And so it's called Ruby Takes Chicago. Woohoo! Set in the 1920s. Thank you, Dr. Jacalyn.
That's super excited. I didn't even know about that one, DIANN. You snuck that one right in. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I want to bring out our guest who's joined us from South Dakota. I've never actually been to South Dakota, so I'm excited to hear more about it. But Gary is an inventor, an international researcher, and an author. So that kind of makes him very unique compared to other authors that we bring to the program. His name is Gary Wietgrefe. Let's welcome him to the program. Gary, come on out.
Hi there. Good morning, Jacalyn and DIANN. Appreciate you having me on this morning.
Yes, thank you so much for being here. I loved our little chat very briefly behind backstage in the green room, but you really have a very unique perspective to some of the other authors whom we've had here on this show. So when we think about an inventor, okay, that takes a huge amount of time and persistence, right? And patience. And then an international researcher, I'm imagining you traveling all over the world. That takes time, money, effort. And then, of course, being an author, how do you manage to do all of these things so well, Gary?
Well, I hope I do them well. I think from the technical standpoint, when you learn to write, it's always good to learn to write technical writing. And so through my career, I made my living in agriculture. And over time, I developed concepts that automated equipment design, for example, that was a piece of equipment, but then I had to think of how to make it work with the engineering part of it. And so I had to write it so that not only I would understand it, but the attorneys and the patent attorneys and others would understand it. And best of all, it had to be understood by the patent office. And then they analyzed it to see how patents, my proposed patents, differentiate from any other patent out there. So I have 4 patents on engineering, 1 on design, and 1 on biomass processing.
Woo,
Wow.
Gary, that's
Wow.
amazing. You know,
Thank you.
I'm a big fan of Shark Tank, and I know when someone brings forth a product, they always ask, what kind of patent do you have? Do you have a patent? What is that process like to even get one?
It's a long, drawn-out process. And if you can't explain your idea, nobody else is going to get it, and you'll never get a patent on it. You have to be able to explain your idea and how it's different than any other idea in the world.
And would you say this takes years or months?
Years.
Years.
You better allocate years to the process, because you may write it up in a period of a month or 2 and think through it. And then I worked with patent attorneys that helped basically fill in the gaps of what I didn't know. I didn't even know what they were going to ask. And so they obviously do research on what's out there for other patents. And then the patent attorneys eventually submit it to the patent office. And my latest patent, I received, I think I started that in around 2008, and I received it in 2014. So it can take quite a while, especially with extensive patents, which there's 20 some independent claims on that last patent.
Well, congratulations on that. That is super exciting.
Thank you. Thank you.
What role do your patents play in the industry of agriculture, or whatever industry that they really are meant to align with?
That's a great question, because a lot of patents and a lot of inventions, there's inventions and there's patents. And I have some inventions that aren't patented, but I just make them available to the public. But the inventions, the practical standpoint is, for example, in my work, I developed a bulk handling system in the US starting in 1998. And my goal was to have it available throughout the US by 2015. Well, I had that done by 2012, and I retired, but I had developed it basically in the US and Canada. And my last project was to host Argentinians to introduce it to Argentina.
Woo! For all those people sitting on their couch eating bonbons, I'm just saying.
It's just what I do. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Diane?
It's really pretty exciting. So how did you go from there to, I saw that you love to write poetry. So how did you go from there to poetry?
It's it seems like a stretch, but poetry is the fun part. Technical writing is in research papers. I researched with, for example, 15 years with the University of Uludağ in Bursa, Turkey. That is technical writing, where poetry I can just pick up and start writing poems for fun. Just and I like to rhyme. I'm more of a 19th century poet, where virtually everything told stories and was in rhyme, and that's what I like to do for fun. So I'll sit down in the morning and I'll write a poem and maybe start a different one in the afternoon, and maybe not look at another poem for a week or 2, and all of a sudden an idea comes to me and I just whip out a poem.
Just rip out a poem. You know, it is a gift to be able to do poetry.
Yes, and 90+% of the poetry today in the last, and it's more so in the 21st century than it was even the last half of the 20th century, but very few poems rhyme. It's not a common media anymore. And because I grew up, in fact, I brought this one out. This was my grandmother's book, 101 Famous Poems, and they're authors from the basically the 17th century through the 19th century, But this book was given to my grandmother by her two sisters in around 1930. It's copyright 1928.
Wow, that's very special.
It sure is. Would you say that you're a romantic at heart?
I never thought of it that way, but I think so.
I think
Yes,
so.
I think I am.
It's so interesting because of the technical writing and then sort of writing from the heart. You know, I hear what you're saying about it's not a far leap, but they do seem like two different parts of your brain.
Well, Dr. Jacalyn, I mean, you're a TV host. I mean, you have a broad background, but this is a different media than a lot of people are used to, and you're great at it. So you pick what you're good at.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. So tell us about your role as an international researcher. What type of research have you done and where?
Well, it actually started when the Soviet Union collapsed in the early 1990s. I had published a couple of books on the ancient grain millet. I did one on international marketing where it was, and by the way, in 1989, I charged $100 a copy for that book. And I still charge $100 a copy, although I make it for free on researchgate.com. But a Swiss aid organization went into Mongolia because the people basically didn't have food. There was only 3% of the whole ground area in Mongolia is farmed. And what I did, that Dr. Marcus Drubeck came to Minneapolis, seen my books at the University of Minnesota, and basically we started a research project with a master's degree student at the University of Uludağ, University of Mongolia. And I sent over not only my books, but of course, email was available then, which I emailed back and forth my agronomic expertise and sent actually varieties of millet that we developed here in the U.S. or that were developed in the U.S. I sent them over to Mongolia. And it wasn't until last year that I noticed that research was good. It was irrigated crop production in Mongolia of very high elevations, and it wasn't published other than her master's work. And so I put it out into a research paper on the history of Mongolia government, and it went through almost every type of conceivable government during the 20th century. And no matter what the government was in Mongolia, people had to eat. So it went from a 300-year dynasty to socialism, to Buddhist theocracy, to the Chinese ruled for a while, to communism, to a democracy in the late 1990s. And so these people ate, and what did they rely on? Basically millet, which was an ancient grain. For thousands of years, they've eaten in northern China and Mongolia, and they drank camel's milk and mixed it with a tea. That was their nutrition. And so they couldn't rely on any government, so they just had to figure out how to feed themselves and their families.
Well, that sounds fascinating.
Wow.
What were some of the key takeaways that you still have today from that?
Well, that actually led me into other research. And so basically the takeaway is that it's necessity of life to be able to feed yourself. You as a individual, as a family, need to rely on you and your resources, not to rely on somebody else. And so I'm quite an independent guy. I've raised my children to be independent, and they're all successful. And that, I think, led into some of my other work, certainly into Turkey, where I researched with them for 15 years, University of Uludağ in Bursa, Turkey. And one of our first research projects was, again, on millet that I sent over there because Turkey, for about 4,000 years, has been consuming millet. In fact, when I was over there, they told me about how they, around Christmas time to New Year's, they always had a warm drink. We would think of it as eggnog, but it was made of millet. And so 2023, by the way, if your audience doesn't know, is the International Year of the Millets. They're ancient grains that have kind of been lost, but rural people eat them. And I just happened to have farmed on our farm. We raised it, and I wrote books on how to produce it. And I produced YouTube videos now on, I just released my 5th YouTube video on producing and marketing millet just on Friday.
So fascinating.
Wow.
Really is. I'm wondering, just an extension from what you just shared, and then we'll go over to Diane. We have a number of shows here about It's Your Healthy Lifestyle, about nutrition, about supplementation. What role do you feel that we should embrace these grains? Is this something that is everybody should take in to be healthy and have a healthy lifestyle?
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. We just had an international millet conference down in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, about 3 weeks ago, and there were speakers. I was a keynote speaker, but we had speakers from India, Nigeria, Kenya, Switzerland, and so these are thanks to the efforts by the United Nations, bringing out that there's more to world nutrition and very healthy grains like the millets compared to basically corn and wheat and rice. They are high producing grains. Proso millet is called common millet. Proso is a Russian word for millet, basically. But it's a common millet. It's very nutritious. It's sustained people, as I mentioned, Mongolia for thousands of years. And we raise a lot of it here in South Dakota, Colorado, Nebraska. And it's just a grain that not only the people in the U.S. Should be eating, but people around the world are eating.
Thanks for bringing that to my attention. I'm going to look into that and incorporate that into my lifestyle. Diane?
So a while back, we moved over to Ezekiel bread, which uses millet, and gotten totally off of wheat. So, but I always wondered how you could grow millet. My husband has a tiny little, I call it his little farm, but anyway, where he grows things along with his herbs. So I'm definitely going to watch your YouTube.
Well, that's fantastic. And I'm not saying people should get away from corn, should get away from wheat or rice, but they should blend in other grains like millet. You know, a lot of people think of it as quinoa, but quinoa is not a millet. It's a grain originally out of South America, but it's very local production, where millet, like Proso millet, is grown around the world, both in the northern and southern hemisphere. When I was in Australia, I went to, by accident, I was to a farm that raised millet, and I'd gone there to look at some dairies, and I was just amazed that virtually the same millets that we raise here, different varieties, of course, are raised in Turkey, raised in Mongolia, raised in the U.S. and in Australia.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating. So I'm going to take you to another topic, if that's okay with you, Dr. Jack.
Let's go. Okay.
I was curious, and I know we need to get to your books, but I was reading about you, and you and your wife for a while didn't have a house. You went traveling, right?
We did. We sold our house because I was traveling a lot. We sold our house in 2003, and then I retired in 2012, and we bought an RV. We were thinking, okay, we'll just travel a couple summers in the RV. Well, our son was a doctor in Australia, under contract for 3 years, so we spent 2 winters, which is their summer, over in Australia, and enjoyed that. We come back and we sold the RV, and we just traveled for about 9 years until COVID shut us down, and then we rented an apartment for a while, and I finished my book. For example, I bicycled from Pierre, our state capital, to North Pole, Alaska, where our niece and nephew live, and so we were free to do that because we weren't tied down by mowing lawn or shoveling snow or maintaining a house.
That is so incredible.
So liberating. I love it. One of our team members did something similar. He was on the island of Mallorca and got into his RV and has been driving for over a year through Europe. So it's kind of cool.
Just it's freedom. And as I said earlier, I like to be liberated. You get to do what you want to do.
That is so true. And I just want to throw out there, you live in one of my favorite states, South Dakota.
Oh, thank you.
I've been there at least 4 times. I'm like dragging everybody to South Dakota. I think it's awesome.
I've never lived, well, I've traveled a lot of places. I was in the military, Vietnam era veteran, so I spent time in southern Italy, a year and a half there, a year and a half in northern Japan. And so I had some a fair amount of international travel back then. And but I've always had a South Dakota residency. And so my wife and I have lived pretty much every corner of the state. And right now we live in the Black Hills of South Dakota.
Oh God, I love the Black Hills. Well, sorry. Anyway,
Gary,
maybe not Dr. Jacalyn.
I've never been there, but I'd love to go sometime when I get away from the screens. That's another story. But Gary, tell us about this bicycle adventure because you managed to capture it in writing.
Yes, I have not intended to. In fact, I never intended to tell anybody. It was just, I asked my wife, I finished a book tour relating to ancients. I put out 2 books on learning and culture changes around the world. And, it's heavy on the mind. So I go, I want to keep my body active. And so I asked her if she would bicycle with me to see our niece and nephew up in northern Alaska by the Arctic Circle. And she said she would rather drive. So I go, okay. So I flew back from Mexico and she flew back a few days later. And I think within 5 or 6 days, I was pedaling my 10-year-old bicycle up towards North Pole, Alaska. It was very fun. And people thought, my friends and family thought I was going to get killed by traffic because I rode on the roadsides. And I found out that that was not the biggest risk. The biggest risks were wood bison, which are 25% bigger than the plains bison. They're grazing along the roads in the northern British Columbia and the Yukon. I seen hundreds of black bears, as did my wife. Black bears, grizzlies, confronted by moose, wolves. I mean, there's dangers when you get up in that part of the world. There's dangers that you don't think about. Well, COVID shut us down, so we came back and rented a cabin up here in the Black Hills. Again, we still hadn't had a house, so we rented a cabin up here in the Black Hills, and I sat down and I wrote a fun book about a travel adventure that anybody can take. I was 65 at the time. Anybody can get on their bicycle. They may not make it, but they can have fun.
Gary, how did you keep yourself mentally uplifted throughout this, especially when you see large creatures that could take you out?
They will take you out. For example, a wood bison, because they run beside me, they run about an average of 15 miles an hour. And then they can run a lot faster, which I had to basically keep them from turning around and facing me, which the young bulls would always do and protect the herd. And so the cows and the calves would run away and the bulls would protect me. And I found out that my front brake squeaked. So that scared them. So I always had to have enough speed when they turned around that I couldn't stop immediately. I had to have enough speed so that I could squeak the brake to scare them. And so being raised on a farm, a livestock farm, we had cattle and, cows protect their calves, very protective. Pigs, mother sows protect their babies. And so I was used to being around animals. And so every wood bison, every bear, everything reacts differently. And so I read about bears because we don't have them here in South Dakota. I read about bears, and grizzlies can run up to 55 miles an hour for short distances. Black bears, 45 miles an hour. Well, there's no way I'm going to out bicycle them. So I had to figure out how to outsmart them. So.
Did you have any kind of protective gear, or you're just wearing shorts and like how are you dressed?
Once my wife caught up with me in Western Saskatchewan, that's about where you run out of regular motels. And then she caught up with me. She had stayed back from Memorial Day. She had lost her brother. And anyway, caught up with me. And once she did, I started out at 285 pounds, me and the bicycle. And when she got there, I put everything I could from the bicycle into our vehicle, all my extra clothes and food supplies and things like that, parts, bicycle tubes, things like that I threw in the vehicle. And then she went ahead and found food and lodging. So, but you asked earlier about how I kept mentally alert. I did not listen to music. I did not have I didn't listen to radio. I had soft earplugs to keep the wind noise out. but the foam earplugs, I could hear the rustling in the ditch. I could hear the birds. I could hear the natural sounds. And so I couldn't wait to get up every morning. I averaged 75 miles a day for 40 days. I just couldn't wait to get out and be in nature for another 8 hours and 3 minutes. That's what I averaged throughout that trip, 8 hours and 3 minutes on that bicycle.
Wow.
The king of fitness over here. That's amazing.
I'd like to say anybody can do it. I hadn't been on that bicycle in 8 months, and I had hiked the Sierra Madres in Mexico that winter. Well, I do most winters. I hike a lot. And so I came back and I just started out at 50 or 60 miles a day, and then gradually worked up to bigger mileage where it was farther distances. In fact, my longest distance was 166 miles in one day, my bike fully loaded, and that was in Saskatchewan. And the beauty about Saskatchewan is it's extremely flat. And it's a great place to bicycle without a lot of effort.
Incredible experience. Thank you for sharing that with us. Would you like to read from your book, Destination North Pole, so that we can learn more about your experience?
Destination North Pole. It is, why don't they do it this way? Because I do book shows and different things. I flip to a page, and for example, here's a page, the way the book is set up. The top, oops, let me get it right here. The top tells me where we stayed. We did not camp. My wife and I stayed in a motel or bed and breakfast, Airbnb, work camp, wherever there was lodging. She found a place, a clean bed. And so there are the names of the town. The next part of the data is when I got up in the morning, or not when I got up, when I departed, the minute I departed, the minute I arrived, the highways I took that day, how many miles each day, the elevations. There's 8 mountain ranges. And so then I followed that by a blog. I did a blog a daily blog. When I had internet, I sent it out so that friends and family could kind of track me where I was at. And then I write 3, 4, 5 pages about what didn't kill me that day.
What didn't kill you? I love it.
Seriously, I encourage people to do this, and people have used this for their motorcycle rides, for their RV rides, driving to Alaska. So it can be a guide that way. At least you know where you have places to stay. I stopped at historic markers. As I mentioned in my other books, I like history. And so I stopped at historic markers. That was a place for me to take a break and give me something to think about, maybe for the next 30 miles or 40 miles.
Gary, we would love for you to read aloud from the book if you'd like to.
Okay. I wasn't prepared to do that, but let me just, there was one place, if I could find it quickly, it'd take me a little bit. But when I was biking along, and I don't know if I heard something or felt something or seen something out of the corner of my eye, but I turned my head to the right, and about my arm length away was the eyeball, the head of a not a whooping crane, but a sandhill crane. The wingspan is like 5 foot, 6 foot across, and she was drafting me. I was going up into the wind about 14, 15 miles an hour, and I go, this is crazy. I wish I could find that on her. It was crazy, and so I slowed down, and she flew into the ditch in front of me, and just walked there and whacked, a quack, and they stand about 5 foot tall. And she walked into the bush, which we would call it like brush, but they call it bush in the Yukon. It's cut away from the highways mostly, and then it goes into the trees. And in there, and I stopped, and I had my peanut butter sandwich, and I go, this is crazy. I tried to take a picture of her, and she's squawking. I don't know if she wanted me to follow her in there or what, but there's too many bears for me. And so I tell this story because of all the pictures I took. Her head is like this big compared to everything else, and I never actually could find her head in the pictures. And so I tell about that story. Well, I just picked a page here now. With the barking dog quickly approaching, I yelled, "I gotta go." I hung up the phone. My nephew called me to find out where I was at. I hung up the phone, pocketed the cell phone as I unclipped and remounted. None too soon. The dog gained on me up to the next incline. But before I could reach the top, luckily, it had turned back. So that's, one paragraph of one dog that happened to chase me. I tell you what, this was written during COVID. I biked before COVID. I had no idea, of course, that we were going to be in a pandemic. But when we rented this cabin up in the Black Hills, I just sat there and I said, the last thing people want to hear now or read now is somebody struggling on their way to Alaska. I didn't struggle. I had the time of my life, and that's what the book is about. It is a fun read, a fun adventure. I've written it so that fourth and fifth grade person could read it, but I have a lot of senior citizens that pick it up and say it's just a great armchair read.
Wow, I love your enthusiasm, and I also like the fact that you've opened my eyes, at least to think about, instead of living in a place of fear and being afraid of all of these animals, to be able to appreciate them and to coexist with them.
That's what we should all do. We need to do that, not only with animals, but with our pets at home, but with other people. We go out into the public. I don't care if it's a grocery store, a parking lot. You see somebody drop something, pick it up for them, and we'll all get along a lot better that way.
You fit in perfectly here with our platform. That's what we're all about, Gary. So.
Well, thank you, Doctor. You host a great program, and I appreciate you having me on it today. So, we've covered a lot of different topics. You initially, I was going to talk about my book of poetry because it's my last one. I have I've got 3 of them in the works. So this is the first. I call it Dakota Country Poems. I have one that I'm working on now. In fact, I just got the sketches back from a sketch artist, but it's a book-length poem. It's written for, we'll say, 4th and 5th, 6th graders, but it's so I'm not sure if it's going to be a textbook or not. But the whole poem is 350 stanzas, all rhyming, 4-line stanzas, and it tells about when I was in country school. I started the first grade. We didn't have kindergarten. I started the first grade in a 1-room country school. And then halfway through the year, we moved back to our other farm, and then spent the next 4 years in another 1-room country school. And I was the only student. And so I tell funny stories in a rhyming nature of what I remember of country school. The teachers, the kids, the pranks that they played on her, things like that.
Gary, we can't wait to hear some of your rhymes. Can you please read from this book, please?
Okay.
I have to say aloud, because I've had other people say, well, you didn't say out loud, so I'm reading it to myself. So read it out loud. Great.
All right. I'm not sure if many people are aware of badgers, but badgers are a large rodent, like 20, 30 pounds, that dig big holes, and they'll dig them in fields, they'll dig them in pastures, they'll dig them on the gravel road to our farm. And so they're annoying. So I go, yeah, but they're a nice animal. They don't mean to be annoying. That's just what they do. Okay. So I wrote a poem about badger. I want to get along with my natural friends, a truce all day long, though night he still defends. What is it in darkness that makes senses keen? Is it loneliness or desire to be unseen? In the ground he wallows, damp, dark, and drear. Maybe he hollows without someone near. He connects his hidden holes, ever building his domain. Who on earth goes solo, a lonely life maintained? Is he being a pest to badger those above, or just lying there in rest, hiding his secret love? Watch, oh watch at midnight, neither slumber nor retreat. Under a milky moon draws Similar's eyes to meet. What comes after midnight? A path to her retraced, with passionate delight, warm, welcoming embrace. Searching this lonesome prairie, each night has been so long. Do you want to come with me to see where I belong? When in his secret chamber, protected from above, into his cove he takes her. He now has his beloved. I'm irritated to know you're digging in my path. Who wouldn't defend his hold, protecting his litter at last? Excuse me. Thank you. Thank you.
Outstanding. You're so talented.
Can I do one more if we have time?
Yes.
This one I haven't put it in a book yet, but it's Migrating Monarchs, and I want to tell a little bit about this. I have some ground, our farm ground, and I have a creek area, 26 acres that I've left undisturbed. It's natural prairie. It's never been tilled or anything, and we haven't run cattle in there since the 1990s. And so I maintain that for a natural habitat, and I try to get milkweed and other things, flowers going for in this case, monarch butterflies, because they migrate through here. And where we winter in Mexico is on the west coast of Mexico, and the mountains of Michoacan, Mexico. There's 3 sanctuaries that public can get in to see the monarchs where they winter. And so these are the same monarchs through 4 to 7 generations come through our farm on the way up to Canada and then return. And so in fact, this week I just took pictures of moths as they're, not moths, but the worm stage as they're migrating back south. They're eating milkweeds. And so I wrote this poem, Migrating Monarchs, last summer. And this winter, my wife and I were in Mexico, and we go, let's take a tour up there. And so we were able to hire a private guide to take us into the most remote site that the public can get to, where bus tours can't get in. And we spent a morning, early afternoon, so 6 hours or so, in the monarch habitat, wintering habitat. And so when I finished that, the next day, I went to we were staying in the motel. I stayed in there in the morning, and I put a YouTube video out on migrating monarchs. So if you want to see it, just enter my last name and Migrating Monarchs, a short 4-minute YouTube video, which shows the monarchs in their winter sanctuary. I read the poem, and then I show how we're trying to maintain our farm in South Dakota to host these monarchs as they move through. So here's my poem on migrating monarchs. It is the monarch's duty to warm the hearts of men. Women, behold their beauty, uphold them with their hands. As an ancient symbol to poor peasants below, an insect so simple has honor to bestow. Gliding multiple pairs of wings, delicate and thin, ascend with warm air, depending on the wind. Migrating from the south, north to open plains, monarchs flutter about through meadows and lush greens. Tender are their wings, of beauty all their own. Lovely earthly things float as they roam. Savoring milkweed tapas, monarchs navigate by sun, like a sailor's compass on their annual run. As they hover aloft and beautify the skies, with sovereignty yet soft, each monarch dies. Generations number 7 along their annual flight, flowing forth from heaven, doubles our delight. Though many miles they roam where ancestors were before, each fall they head home, following ancient lore. Many millions descend in the fir forest of Michoacan, reaching their yearly end. They rest, then go again.
Wow.
Wow. I'm so moved by that.
So you can hear it you can hear me reading it on the YouTube video if you want to do that.
Fantastic. And I'm just thinking, I need to introduce you to a couple of people on our platform that are all about monarch butterflies, and we're talking about them on a regular basis. So before we close out, I do want to share your website. Let's take a look at this. Okay, so Culture, Learning, and Adventure. Tell us where to go here on this website so our audience can enjoy more of what you're doing, Gary.
The best way is just click on books, and that'll open the book page, and so it'll show, I think, 6 of my books and maybe some research papers, and then from there, the tabs across the top, you can go in to do listen to some of the audios where I'll have audios. I do discussions. I have the blog, and so the top takes you to a lot of places, and of course, here's some of my books.
Look at the size. That's a bison?
That's a wood bison. And this is me on the bicycle. I took that photo early one morning as I was in northern British Columbia heading towards the Yukon. And a wood bison, a bull like that, was on the side of the road. And of course, I ride between the white line and the shoulder. And I go, oh man, this is going to be an interesting one. And so he was actually around the corner beyond that blue sign. And so I took off my phone because I always want to get a video of it if I can. And so I clicked some pictures, and it was too blurry, too dusty. I mean, dust was kicking up behind him, and as he was running just on the side of me. And the guy that did my book cover says, this is a photo that we'll use, but I'm going to have to use a different picture of a bison. So he inserted this wood bison there. But the blue sign, the reason I stopped was that blue sign. And it said 188 kilometers in French and in English, 188 kilometers to the next services. I go, oh, this is going to be a long day. And to be fair, I did not have a bear in the picture. There's a moose sign on the side, and there's a kind of a brown bear sign. But my wife, I said, was driving, made the 3,000 miles by herself. And one day she was following this lady, and this bear come across the road. The lady stopped in that white car in front of her. And so that's photoshopped in. That lady in the white car was trying to feed something to the bear out the window. And the wife's thinking, man, I'm going to have to hit the bear. I'm going to have to figure out how to save her. Luckily, the bear was smart enough than the tourist. And so the bear walked across and it went on. So that I had to put a bear in my picture too. So that was photoshopped in.
It's great, though. I absolutely love that book cover. I love the shadow of you there on the bike as well.
You can tell it's early morning. And the reason I thought it was going to take me 60 days. And so I left on May 20th, which is the longest day of the year, of course, is June 20th. And if I'm biking to a clean bed in the Yukon, it could be long days. And so if I'm still biking at midnight, at least have light, because it's still light out at midnight.
Gary, did you have any bad weather?
Anytime you bicycle, there's always bad weather. There's always wind. And I biked from Pierre to North Pole, Alaska. It's up by the Arctic Circle. And the winds in the plains, northern plains, are from the northwest. And the winds in Canada are primarily, especially in the plains, the prairie provinces, are from the west. Well, I bicycled basically into the wind. And so virtually everybody I seen that was bicycling was coming the other way. And so, yes, I had rain showers. I did take 2 days off. After my wife arrived, I took a rest day in Western Saskatchewan, basically to recoup, supplies and everything else. And it rained heavy that day. So I took that day off, and then I took a day off in Grand Prairie, Alberta, where some friends lived, and it drizzled that day. But I biked a number of days in drizzle. We stayed at Glacier View Motel, and so I should have thought that it could be pretty cold the next morning, and it was. It was almost 7 miles incline from where we stayed to the top of that pass. There's 8 mountain ranges, so I don't stop when I go over hills or mountains. I bike until I get to the top. I have to go slow, but the hardest thing for me is to stop and try to get my legs and things going again. So I don't stop. I just go. Well, that day, luckily, my wife had bought gloves in Alberta, and I had warm gloves on, but I was still freezing, snow flurries. So there's all kinds of, you can run into bad weather if you're going to bicycle.
Incredible story, so inspirational. And I'm here on your website. Are people able to purchase your books?
Yes, they can go through my website and get them. Of course, they can get them on Amazon. I have a New York distributor that distributes my books, my research papers, and my 2 millet books. By the way, the one here, the blue one just above your screen, was published in 1990. That's by far my most popular book. It's in virtually every country that raises millet. It's the only guide of how to actually raise this crop. And as a farmer, I know how. And so it's written in sections. So if you want to know how to plant, or how deep to plant, or how to control weeds, or when to harvest, each little section is in there. So you don't have to read the whole book to help you that day. And so it's, I know it's in 40 some countries, and they're available for free on researchgate.com, and I still sell hard copies. But feel free to investigate these crops. They're a great human resource. They really are.
Anyone having a dinner party, here's your guest. This guy entertained all of us. You are such a fascinating person.
Wow, thank you. It's when you live in South Dakota, there's not a lot of people here. In fact, there's 800,000 people. So if you really tried, you could probably get to know everybody. But you got to figure out how to make a living. And so I, as a farm kid, like I said, I was in school by myself, and so I had to figure out, listen to older kids, 6th, 7th, 8th grade in the same room. I'd listen to their lessons, and they go, "Oh, I need to know that." And so I learned to be, I guess, more independent and try to figure out how to do things myself, because I didn't have anybody else in my class. There's nobody to compare with.
Well, Gary, you certainly stand alone. You are a huge inspiration. Thank you for being here today. What's the best way for people to reach out to you, and who would you like to contact you?
Please, anybody that contacts me, I get messages from farmers. They can reach me through my website. The best way to do it is relatingtoancients.com, relatingtoancients.com. And on there, just click the little click on contacts, and that I answer all of them. They all come to me. I have nobody running my website. It's all me, so I might not get you really quick, but I do travel a lot yet. I still help my grandson farm and things like that. But please contact me there. My works, for the most part, are available on my website. I do have some audio recordings on specific topics. They can go on researchgate.com. I have my patents on there. My international research is on there. And my books are there for free, my millet books. So you can download the PDF versions of those. So relatingtoancients.com.
All right. Thank you so much. We are showing both of your websites that you just mentioned here in the comments, so people are free to reach out to you. And Gary, we hope that you'll come back and join us on another one of our shows, because I know we're just opening the lid a little bit. Yeah. There's so much more to come out.
Well, I really appreciate you hosting me. And, I just encourage people to, whatever their job is, to just sit down and write something. I don't care if it's a note to a friend, if it's a letter, or if it's an idea of a short poem or a little short story. It helps keep the mind active, and as you age, try to keep your body active.
All right.
Words of wisdom. Words of wisdom. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Gary. We look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, Diane.
Diane, another brilliant episode. Thank you so much. How can people reach out to you, and who would you like to contact you?
So you can reach me at my website. That's the easiest, DIANNFLOYDBOEHM.com, DIANNFLOYDBOEHM.com. And I absolutely loved our show today. Gary was incredible. And you're right, Dr. Jacalyn, we just barely opened up the lid on this incredible author.
Thank you so much, Diane. And thank you so much for your sponsorship, which we're going to take a look at right now. And we'll be back with our next show, which is World Jenny's Day. So please do stay tuned. Please reach out to Gary. Please reach out to Diane. Please reach out to me. That's why we're here. We're here to bring hope, inspiration, and support you. You have a safe space to share your voice with any of us, and we'd love to connect. That's all for now. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody. Hello, I'm children's author Diann Floyd BOEHM, and I am co-host for several of the USA Global TV and radio shows. I joined because of the purpose of the USA Global TV and radio. They provide content for the viewers and listeners, an opportunity for people around the world to have their own show or even be a guest on an existing show. We truly believe in helping others get their positive message out to the world. We also have the opportunity for the listeners. You can watch on several platforms, and on YouTube, you can ask questions and even give a comment. We absolutely love it.
I love being part of the USA Global TV and Radio because I love positive messages. And who doesn't? And we need more of that in the world. We are a family, and we hope you will join us and become part of the family too.